Yes, Carrie. So the Bhopal gas tragedy was a shocker in 1984. It happened on the night of December 2nd and 3rd. I had relatives in Bhopal who escaped, unhurt, which was good. But I think those of us who were living in MP and in the days when there was no social media, no media itself, it was not just a big tragedy, but there was a lot of misinformation which happened, which went around for days together. So it was a big deal for the state in those times. The pesticide plant in Bhopal, there was a gas leak. There was a leak of methyl isocyanide, which is a highly toxic substance. And not just Bhopal, but the towns around the city were also impacted by that. And if you look at the death toll, the estimates have been varying. Like the official number was pegged only around at 2,200 odd, but the local media claimed that there were thousands who died on that day itself, on the first night itself. And even when the compensation was announced by the state government much later, in I think in 2006, the state government gave out compensation. Even then, they compensated close to 4,000 families for those who had died, and more than 6 lakh injured people. So the numbers have been quite varying. The owner, which was the Union Carbide India Limited, at that time was owned by entity called UCC, uh, which and of course was the government of India stake also in it through public holdings, etc. And UCC then paid like 860 million last year. I mean, actually in 2019, for a full settlement of the case. Uh, but in 1994 itself, UCC had sold its stake to Eveready's India Limited, which then subsequently merged with McLeod Russell India. And after that, the license to operate that site was terminated because the site was handed over back to the government of India by these private entities. And in the meanwhile, Dow Chemical had bought over the UCC a firm in 2001. So basically, several corporate entities have been involved in this, and hence no blame could really be pinned on any specific firm eventually, because there were so many mergers and acquisitions and divestments that the real owners at that time, which was the Union Carbide, was never really punished to the fullest extent for this disaster. What also happened was that days after the gas leak, uh, Warren Anderson, who was the chairman then of Union Carbide, actually came to Bhopal. He was advised not to come, but he wanted to visit the site, etc. So he came. He was immediately arrested by the CBI then and put in a guest house, and put under like house arrest kind of a provision. But then he escaped only after, like in a few hours, he was allowed to leave Bhopal in a plane which was hastily arranged in Bhopal. And no one really knows how he made the phone calls to US Embassy and how that plane was arranged. Swaraj Puri, who used to be the main police officer of Bhopal in those days, he has a record which said that we arrested him on return orders, but we released him on oral orders. And where did these oral orders come from? Where did they originate? Was it the call of the Chief Minister Arjun Singh, or was it there was a instruction from Delhi? We still don't know. In his memoir, Arjun Singh, who has since passed away, he did write that he was instructed by a gentleman by the name of R.D. Pradhan, who was then the Home Secretary, apparently the Home Secretary, to let him go, to let Anderson go. But Pradhan later on has rebutted the argument, saying that he was never the Home Secretary at that point of time. He only took charge much later in Jan 1985. So it's kind of a mystery how and when like the orders came for the release of Warren Anderson. But the fact is that he didn't. I mean, he never faced any prosecution. In fact, the American courts dismissed appeals for a class action suit in the U.S. The Indian laws continued, and of course, as I said, the full and final commercial settlement only happened in 2019. But the victims did not get much of financial compensation. In the meanwhile, in 2010, several employees of the original Union Carbide, including Keshav Mahindra, who was the non-executive chairman of the firm, several of them were actually indicted in this case, but of course they were released on a bail after getting a 2-year imprisonment sentence. But largely speaking, the tragedy remains unsolved in a formal way, and I'm not sure how much have we learned from it, given that these disasters keep happening. I mean, albeit at a much smaller scale. The one I mean, couple of names which need to be mentioned are the two railway officials in Bhopal that night. There was Harish Dhurve, who was the station superintendent of the Bhopal station, and also another of his officials by the name of Dastagir. These two gentlemen actually cleared several trains which were coming into Bhopal. Either they stalled them wherever they were by contacting the other station masters and telling them not to send the trains to Bhopal, or by letting some of the trains leave early from the Bhopal platform. I think one of the trains, which was very crowded, left 20 minutes ahead of the schedule. And these things in railways are not genuine. I mean, not done. Certainly not under the discretion of junior officers. But these two gentlemen, who themselves, I mean, Durve himself passed away in the tragedy, and then Dastagir's son passed away later on, I believe. They suffered major personal consequences in terms of their families, etc. But they literally saved the lives of thousands of people, because had the trains come to Bhopal that night, when the gas was lying low on a cold winter night, several thousands of people would have died. So ordinary Indians rose up the occasion, going beyond the call of their duty, but the politicians failed the country, as they almost always do.
Right. Wow.